You know, for people in my age demographic, generation, what is it, Generation Xers, we grew up at a time when we would go out and play stickball in the middle of the street, drink out of a fire hydrant. We would skateboard, bicycle without any helmets, elbow pads, whatever it was. And we survived. And I remember, if none of you know who Evil Knievel is, but we used to take our bikes and redo them to jump over shit. And mind you, I busted my ass a couple of times doing it. However, you Generation Zers, especially the millennials and the ones after, have basically been born into technology. The minute you came out of your mother's womb, you guys had an iPhone in your freaking hand or some form of technology. So for you, all this is very normal. However, for the rest of us, like me, this is actually terrifying, because what you do not understand is that pretty much you're giving away every aspect of who you are, what you think, what you buy, what you like, what you dislike, who all your contacts are, free to faceless, nameless people who use that information in any shape, way, or form to manipulate you and guide you, whether you know it or not. And that's the true danger involved with all this technology, because for just some simple little comforts or serotonin dumps from getting a like or comment or somebody watching your video, you're willing to give up your freedom and your identity to people who are profiting billions of dollars from that. What am I talking about? Well, let's go on over into the episode and let me get into it for you. Well, welcome, boys and girls, to the the second episode of the MS Files with little old me, Serge A. Mesa, your ever-loving, crazy bearded bald guy that just, like I said, I promised you I was going to open up another channel so I can talk about things that many of you maybe don't understand, because you were born into this stuff. Technology is a good thing. I'm not saying it's bad. However, just like laws are neither bad nor good, it's just the application or the misapplication of them that makes it very, very dangerous. And the biggest danger is the ones that you don't know about. What do I mean? Well, before I get into it, I'm going to ask you to please go ahead and to like, comment, share, and subscribe so that the MS Files just keeps growing. Yes, I kind of bit on the X Files a little bit. Like I said, I'm an old fart. I don't have many genuine ideas. Most of them have all been gone. So on the MS Files today, we're going to touch on Joe Rogan. He had an interesting individual talking about GPT chat. For those of you who don't know what it is, let's go into the episode and let me just show it for you, and let me play the video so you can get an idea of what's going on.
I want to talk about Chat GPT.
Fascinating question.
Yeah.
Have you experimented with it at all?
I have not, but someone, the gentleman who runs the JRE companion page, made a rap with Chat GPT. Like, was it if Kanye West wrote a rap for Chat GPT? They put it on Instagram, but it's like, it seems like a person saying it.
Trey, you are.
I mean, it takes a long time.
Really.
His thing took like 48 minutes to do.
Well, whatever you want to look up right now, we can do it.
Yeah, the problem is you have to cajole it. It'll get something wrong, and you have to say,
But let's just explain what it is.
So ChatGPT is a large language model trained artificial intelligence, which is, let's just say, it can be awful, but it is often surprisingly good at answering questions you might have about how to do things. One of the great triumphs of it is that coders are now asking it to solve coding problems, and it will actually write code that is functional. It's pretty amazing. And it also, there's an implementation of it that if you feed it up to 3 tweets, it will write a New York Times story in one of 5 genres, optimistic, pessimistic, neutral. And, you don't really need the New York Times anymore because it's pretty good at this job, right? So on the one hand,
so now basically you have artificial intelligence that just by putting it, and mind you, the database and the language, it is all gotten from you. All the stuff that you put up on your tweets, on your TikToks, your Instagrams, what have you, this thing has been sucking up all this knowledge. And human beings have not gotten smarter. We've actually gotten dumber. If you look at that movie WALL-E, which I think is brilliant, all you got is these fat, cankle people sitting in these chairs, sucking down Slurpees all the time, getting fatter and fatter and fatter, and dumber and dumber and dumber, because you have computers doing everything for them. Then on top of that, if you look at what's the other movie, Idiocracy, you thought it was stupid, but you know what? That's actually a how do you put it, a way of presenting to you where we're going to the future, because that's where we are now. What do they call it? They satirized our stupidity. We all laughed at it. Because remember, you only laugh at things that are fairly true. So we laughed at that dumb movie because it is true. However, let's keep going and let's take a look at, because there's much more stuff to unfold here.
It's all very interesting that we're living in an era in which there is at least, and this is a prototype, right? This is a prototype that was specifically trained and then placed on the internet so people could play with it. And I've seen lots of interesting uses. It's going to get better, right? We're dealing with ChatGPT 3. There's going to be a ChatGPT 4. But I have to say, I am quite alarmed, not only that this thing exists, but I don't think we're ready for it. And I don't think we're ready for it in a couple different ways. I mean, if you want to comfort yourself and say, well, this isn't that serious that we have this AI that can do these really shocking things. The comforting thing is that the way it's programmed, it doesn't know what it's saying. It doesn't matter that it convinces you that it's saying something and it means it, and that it seems like a creative entity. What it's doing is it is basically using a predictive model that has been trained on a huge data set of written language, right? So the answer is, if you take 3 words in a row, can you predict what the next word is going to be? And they've exposed it to a large data set, and it's gotten really good at predicting basically these sequences to the point that it can now, if you prompt it correctly, it can spit out these very long explanations. Some of them are dead wrong. Sometimes they're right on target.
So now you're telling me we have AI that doesn't know what the hell it's really saying, that's putting out information to you, and that it may be absolutely incorrect, and you wouldn't know the difference because they could go ahead and put anybody's name on it. Yeah, PhD, Dr. Big Balls. Yeah, Dr. Big Hairy Balls is telling you that the world's coming to an end tomorrow. And guess what? You would believe it. Because the way our society has been manipulated and directed for a very long time, we get 90% of our information from these social media platforms. And now it's getting to the point that we have AI that just 3 words, and it'll put out information, and a good percentage of the population will believe it and spread it. How dangerous is that? What do you think about that? I continue.
2 concerns about it. One, if you imagine that this thing just gets a little better than it is, which is inevitable. In other words, if you become expert at operating this thing, at querying it, and it becomes better at understanding a wider range of topics because they turn it loose on everything that's written on the internet, for example, right? Then the point is the ability to fake expertise is going to go through the roof. I don't think we know how we're going to police a world in which, this problem's already bad enough. Most academics are fakers. They don't know that, right? They trained in something, they wrote a dissertation, they think they're experts, but you can see when something unexpected happens, like the pandemic, you get just broad scale failure across entire disciplines where nobody seems to get it right, right? So in that world, this is going to be even worse because now you have an artificial intelligence able to generate things in plain English that are often full of true information, but you don't know whether what generated it is some, brain dead model or something else. That's one concern. And then the other concern is when we say, well, ChatGPT doesn't know what it's saying. It's not conscious. We know it's not conscious because it's not programmed to have a consciousness. We are actually ignoring the other half of the story, which is that we don't know how human consciousness works. I think it's clear that ChatGPT isn't conscious. It couldn't be. But it isn't clear, to me at least, that we are not suddenly stepping onto a process that produces that very quickly without us even necessarily knowing it.
Oof. And what steps, if any, can be done to mitigate that at this point?
Well, it's interesting. I wrote a paper, which I never published anywhere in, I think, 2016 about this very issue. In fact, I used basically the argument that you could attain artificial general intelligence by imbuing computers with a childlike play environment for language and then exposing them to a huge data set, which is not exactly what's happened here, but it's in the ballpark. And I would argue, and I did argue, that one needs to build an architecture in which this can't get away from you, right? And so the architecture that I advocate for is actually a metamorphosis architecture, where metamorphosis is not allowed. It is an affirmative choice of humans, right? In the case of...
Are you boys and girls catching on? Is any of this making sense to you? Please comment down below. Let me know, is this scaring you as much as it's scaring me? Because what he's basically talking about there is propaganda being spewed out by faceless, nameless people. It can be anybody. It could be me, it could be you. And the best lie, the best propaganda, and it's been proven to us over especially the last 3.5 years with the scamdemic, is that they put in little bits of true information, and overall it's a complete lie. But because there's a couple of points of information that are fairly true, you'll be like, ooh, that makes sense. Yeah, I believe that. In my opinion, and like I've done many videos on this in the past, we are going headlong into our own enslavement for just a little bit of comfort, for a little bit of an easier life. You know, the thing is, I'm a big sci-fi buff. The Ex Machina, the movie, which is going to talk about in a second, I've seen it. It's terrifying. And I was talking to the person over at the vape shop, is like, the reason I love sci-fi are just because they're like conspiracy theories. They're only conspiracy theories until the facts are proven true. And so it's the same thing with sci-fi. Sci-fi is just predictive programming of what they're already planning at that time or hasn't been commercially available. And then they're going to put it out later on. What do you think? Because I just did a story the other day on that Klaus Schwab, you will own that thing and like it. Well, if you're a disembodied soul inside the metaverse, you will own nothing, and you will like it because you don't know any better. And you, the millennials, the Gen Zers, and people after, you will not know the life that Generation X, like I had, where we had fun just basically kicking a can down the street. I know it sounds dumb to you, but you know the freedom that we enjoyed and the freedoms that we're watching that are basically being given away because they're not being taken. The majority of people are signing up for this enslavement left and right. And all for this, a serotonin boost to make themselves feel better. The minute you start looking outside of yourself for validation from other people, that's where your enslavement begins. I don't look for validation outside of anybody. I look at myself. I talk to the man upstairs on a regular basis. Because everything is within us. What do you think? Comment down below. Doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree. You think I'm being hyperbolic. You think I'm blowing smoke up your ass. Okay, whatever. And especially the younger generations are the ones that will never know what it is to go wherever you want, whenever you want, without having to show a passport or an ID. Because that is the society that you were born into. However, I continue.
GPT chat, I think some of the artificial intelligence existential risk folks would tell you that one of the dangers is that the chat AI could convince you to do its bidding, right? As you said, when you were looking at this, it felt like a person, right? And the point is, something that feels like a person can play on your emotions, right? Can that be used to cause a failsafe to be removed? Maybe. But in any case, this only deals with one of the two issues I'm raising. The question of actual artificial general intelligence arriving, us not knowing necessarily that it has, right? That's a frightening prospect. And in fact, I have a little thought experiment that might reveal why. But the other issue is the issue of competence, where everybody is using this thing behind the scenes in order to say things that are beyond their own capacity to articulate, right? Then the world becomes some new kind of hall of mirrors. We've had a hard enough time dealing with algorithms on search and feed. This is a whole next level of difficulty in knowing where you are and who you're talking to and what it means.
For those of you that aren't familiar, you can, and I've actually done videos on this with other individuals who have done this stuff, where you'll go do a search for a particular thing on Google. It says it has 1.7 million, let's say, topics. You go into, let's say, the 6th or 7th page on that search, and the algorithm all of a sudden starts feeding you the same exact article, just in future pages. And then from 1 billion articles, you come down to 1,000, but it's 1,000 of the same thing. So you're being manipulated directly, however, you're still being able to see it. Now, my question to you is, what if the algorithms or the AI gets so smart that you no longer see anything else and you believe whatever you're getting is true 100% all the time, and all it is their propaganda being sent to you? That is the issue. That is the problem. And that's why this shit terrifies me. The fact that they're going to do it, I knew they were going to do it. The fact that you're going ahead and signing up for it and using it and thinking it's fun, that's the problem. Let's keep going.
What their motives are, and I think we ought to be on high alert.
Whew. When you extrapolate, when you look at what this does and what it's capable of, and what I think what scares people is something that seems to be a person, but doesn't have any emotion, doesn't have any soul. It's not us, but it behaves exactly as us. And then you can put it in a physical entity. So if you have this chat GPT and then you extrapolate to version 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to communicate with you like Ex Machina, where it's exhibiting all of the behavior characteristics of a person. Like, one of the most terrifying that's one of my favorite movies of all time. I love that movie. One of my favorite movies of all time was when that guy who was brought in to sort of run some tests on these artificial intelligence creations, and determine whether or not they pass as human. What is that test called again? The
Turing test?
Turing test.
Yeah.
And he is in love with this woman. She's manipulated him to the point where he's aided her in her escape. And then she leaves him in that room with the bulletproof glass, and he's pounding on the glass, and she walks away with not a thought at all about him. It is the ultimate example of the worst case scenario of where this can go, where you have something that behaves exactly like a human being and knows how to play upon your sexual urges, your emotional desires, all of those different things that she plays upon. And then she just walks away from him and leaves him to starve to death in this fucking bulletproof room.
There's another movie, I think it's called Her. Excuse me. Just think for a moment, just for a second. And I'm glad Joe Rogan has brought this out, because he's huge. He's got a huge audience, and he puts out some great content and gets some great people. However, listen to what he's saying. Just think about you as a man or a woman. It doesn't matter. That's the best part about this. This transcends, and your sexuality. What if you ran across somebody, or you thought it was somebody, that was telling you and knew how you functioned, how you thought, what you liked, what you disliked, and that person manipulated you into a particular action or a way of thinking? And then after that person got this thing got whatever it needed from you, it just walked away and turned its back on you, and you are the one get left holding the bag of shit. Because we're dealing with entities that are not human. They have no conscience. They're just like Spock, just pure logic, where they just use whatever tool they have to in order to get a certain outcome. And after that outcome is completed, for them, that task is completed, and that you're that task that they completed, and it's done and it moves on. What if it gets to the point that we're all being manipulated on a very large scale, and once they get to that particular endpoint, boom, we're discarded? What do you think that'll do to the human psyche, the human spirit, the human animal? I think for most people it would destroy them, because there is such a incidence of people, their feelings, and this has all been programmed into the Facebooks, the Instagrams, all this social media with these likes, where people look for more validation. These are psychological studies done. You can just read it and check it out for yourself. That people are much more concerned with external validation than they are with internal strength and internal validation, which makes them actually very weak-minded, emotionally unstable, and which can lead to some very violent and horrific acts. It's happened for a very long time, and these are all psychological manipulations. But this is being done on a global, planetary scale. So what if you had, let's say, all of China, the billion people, if they were all being manipulated that way, and then all of a sudden Xi says, all right, go to America, kill everybody? They would. I remember Reverend Sun Myung Moon, some Korean guy, had a cult. The U.S. government, this is back in the 70s already, were terrified of him because he had the church of, I forget what it was, but what he was building was basically an army where these people would do whatever he said. If you remember in the movie Conan, when what's his name? I forget. James Earl Jones. He points to somebody up on top of a parapet. He points at the girl, and she just steps off and jumps. And he says, "Yeah, the power is not steel. The power is people. That you can manipulate people and have them do whatever you want to do." And this is just the same exact thing on steroids. What do you think? Let's keep going.
And I'm now recalling the film, and it's done very well because it manipulates you passively in your seat,
Yes.
right, as it manipulates this character on the screen. And so you are betrayed too
Yes.
in this. You want to believe that it's emotional, and it has none of that.
You feel bad for this woman, what you
Right.
think is a woman, who is contained. And, when she's saying to him when the power goes out, don't trust him. And then, the power comes back on, she behaves normally again. You're like, oh my God, like she's trapped.
Right.
Like this poor creature, they've made a person essentially. And she has these thoughts and hopes and dreams, just like a regular person, but now she's trapped and he falls in love with her. And even though he's seen her in her robot form, when she puts skin on and when she puts clothes on, when she's in front of him, he's in love with her.
Right. And it, again, it plays very well because there's a manipulable circuit in straight men.
Yeah.
This particular narrative,
Right,
you'd
but I
have
mean-
to be a gay woman or a straight man
Right.
for it to trigger you. But part of this is actually inevitable in the ChatGPT story because, especially to the extent that this is a mindless entity that doesn't know what it's doing, it's
Right.
just striving to do it better.
Yes.
The tactics that work will register as, oh, you did it right. So to the extent that you have those vulnerabilities in you and it finds them and that works, then the point is reinforcement. Right?
It scares us because it's not us, but it is us.
Well-
because it's behaving exactly like us, but it doesn't have all the things that make a person a person. It doesn't have the biological vulnerabilities. It doesn't have the ability to actually sexually reproduce. It doesn't have emotions. It doesn't have all these different things that we like to think of. The soul, whatever that means.
Boys and girls, I don't know if this terrifies you as much as it does me. However, I ask you, I know a lot of you are just going to go, like with the TikTok, same thing. In China, TikTok doesn't allow any of the stupid crap that we can see here because they want to keep people here. And that's just a localized type of thing. However, they want to keep America stupid and seeing the dumbest things in the world where your intelligence doesn't, escalate in any shape, way, or form. In China, they ban all that stuff and all they can see are instructive programs, things that help them to better themselves as engineers, mathematicians, what have you. So just think about it when it gets implemented on a global level, where you're being manipulated and being told what they want you to know. Because right now, the ChatGPT may not know what it's saying, but how do you know the person that's using it may not be somebody that's actually in power, a psychopath, some sort of elite, putting out this information, and you're just going to digest it because, for the most part, a lot of you have grown up with this technology and it's, like drinking a glass of water for you guys. So what I ask is, why don't you put down the phone for a while? Talk to a friend, talk to people. You'd be surprised how good it feels to, instead of texting, I've seen boyfriends and girlfriends sit next to each other and text. Yes, I understand that texts are useful when you don't want to hear anybody, hear you say anything and you want to be anonymous. However, put that shit down. Start talking with each other, start interacting, start having dialogues, learn an instrument, learn how to build something. Start using the tools that were given to you, because you know what? If in the future the internet goes down, electricity goes down, all this stuff just goes away, what are you going to do with yourself? A lot of you know, not much. So start training. Like I said, don't be scared, be prepared. And how do you prepare yourself? You start learning different things that you can do with your hands, your mind, music, art, reading. Will be a lot better than the amount of time that we are wasting on social media. What do you think? Comment down below. Well, this is the end of episode 2 of MS Files with your host, Sir J. Mesa. Catch you later.